Hello, I hope you're well. Welcome or welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video, which is a good old-fashioned birthday book haul. We've got historical fiction, we've got nonfiction, we've got classics, we've even got a cookbook, all books that I am very, very excited about. My 35th birthday was on January 11th, and I did receive a few gifts from family and friends, as well as perhaps bought myself a couple as well. And since I wasn't able to talk about these on my channel yet either, I did throw in the one or two books that I did get over Christmas, which was just a few weeks prior to my birthday as well. These are all books that I am just really, really excited to read at some point. Some of them I have read previously, and so these are just fun new editions of those books. But why don't we dive right in? So I'm going to start off with the three books that I did get for Christmas. Two of them are books that I have already read, and you'll see why I got these editions for Christmas. But the first book that I want to talk about is actually called The Lost Bookshop by Evie Woods. So I don't know if you get served the same Insta stories and reels as I do, but I feel like every year I get served the same one that's about an Icelandic tradition where the Icelandic people exchange books on Christmas Eve and then they read for Christmas. And I just reshared it on my personal Instagram and was like, I would love to do this. And my wonderful aunt went and took the initiative and bought and sent me this book. She lives in Canada, so she's quite a bit away and I don't get to see her all that often, but I just thought that was super, super sweet. This is a book that, from what I gather, is a bit of magical realism. It also says it's a blend of high fantasy, romance, and historical fiction. The three main characters seem to be drawn to this magical bookshop where they somehow discover that their own lives aren't that ordinary after all and might be just as extraordinary, if not more so, than the characters in the books that they love. So it sounds really, really cozy and like a book that really should be an easy read. I had not heard of the book prior to it arriving in my mailbox, and I would say that the magical realism aspect of it isn't normally my cup of tea. But as I said, this was a very, very heartwarming gift from my aunt, and so I certainly want to give it a chance. Next are my Penguin Classic cloth-bound editions. For the last, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years, I've been putting on my Christmas list one or two of the cloth-bound gorgeous editions of classics that are very special to me. Either they're favorite books of all time or they just left sort of a very strong impression on me. So the first of those that I got from my parents was Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I was 15 or 16 when I read this for the first time, when I was in my deep classics exploration, completely voluntary. This was when I was reading Tolstoy. This is not a book that I would recommend for a 15 or 16-year-old, except one as precocious as yours truly. But I remember finishing this book and just having so many feelings that I just kind of laid on the couch in my parents' entertainment room, staring off into space. Like, the feelings were so complex and a little bit heavy from what I recall, and I just really needed to sit and marinate with them. And I have always said that this was probably not a book for a 15 or 16-year-old, and I should revisit it and see if it leaves the same impression. So I'm very much looking forward to reading this particular edition. This is the story of Emma Bovary. She's a young woman who marries a kind of boring provincial doctor in France, and she has kind of these romantic and very idealistic views of her future in this marriage, and it doesn't pan out that way. She kind of realizes life is really boring and makes a lot of kind of reckless decisions along the way, and I am here for it. It was, as I said, not a book that a 15 or 16-year-old typically reads, but it was fascinating, and I really am curious to see if it hits me the same way or hits me a little bit differently now that I've actually experienced life a little bit more. The next cloth-bound edition that I got, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is probably one of my most read or reread books of all time. I read it in high school. I read it for several classes in college as an English lit major. I've also read it several times on my own and actually tried to revisit it again in October, but I wanted to listen to it as an audiobook, and the audiobooks had like holds and waits of like months, literal months. So that didn't end up panning out for me. But this is like your quintessential Victorian Gothic novel. It is about Jane Eyre, an orphan who has a really crummy start to life. She lives with a very cruel aunt, gets sent away to this really strict boarding school, and eventually she ends up being a governess at Thornfield Hall, where she encounters Mr. Rochester, and it's all about kind of her quest for independence and freedom, and has all sorts of twists and turns, kind of a dark romance. I feel like most people know what this book is about, so I won't go into too much detail, but it is it is a classic, and it is a book that I have thoroughly enjoyed every time I've read it. Is Mr. Rochester problematic? Yes. Are there certain themes that are also problematic? Yes. But I think this is a book that you have to remember was written during the 19th century, and so you have to look at it through that lens. And yeah, looking forward to rereading this book sometime in the near future. Okay, so next we're actually going to talk about the books that I got for my birthday. The first, I'm Mostly Here to Enjoy Myself by Glynnis MacNicol. This is a memoir, and I will admit the cover is what got me. Like this was truly like, ooh, shiny, what is that about? And then when I read about it, it intrigued me. So it's somewhat like a COVID pandemic novel in the sense that that seems to be what kicks off this book. Glynnis is a unmarried woman with no children. She's 46 years old. She weathers the COVID, isolation in New York City for a year and jumps at the chance when she's given the opportunity to sublet a friend's Paris apartment. And I mean, really, who wouldn't? But from what I have gleaned from the book flap, basically hedonism at its finest ensues. Lots of good food, lots of good sex, just a lot of enjoying life, the joie de vivre. You know, you gotta love it. So I'm all here for it. I personally really enjoy reading books that are about women of a certain age, or women that are at least not, 18, 19, 20, because life doesn't stop then. As a 35-year-old, never been married, no kids, with the exception of my fur baby Memphis, I'm kind of intrigued by the premise of this book. I am in no way, shape, or form as carefree and fancy free as Glynnis, I imagine, is for this book to be worth reading. However, I can live vicariously through her shenanigans, and that's what I intend to do. The next book was one that I didn't know was coming out. I didn't know it existed, but bear in mind I've been very removed from BookTube, Bookstagram, anticipated release blogs, and all that stuff. However, when I saw this on a table in Barnes & Nobles, I could not buy it. It was an insta-buy. You'll see why in a minute. Really, more a second. It's The Voyage Home by Pat Barker. I have gushed effusively about Pat Barker on this channel in the past. I've read the Regeneration trilogy, which is a World War I trilogy, and it was fantastic. I have read the two other books in her Women of Troy series, which I did not realize was a series. This is the third installment. So there was The Silence of the Girls, The Women of Troy, and now The Voyage Home. These are all feminist retellings of the Trojan War. So they focus on the women surviving sort of really difficult wartime situations. And this book is no different. It focuses around Ritza, I believe is how you pronounce her name, a slave of Agamemnon's, his mistress Cassandra, who has the gift of prophecy after being kissed by Apollo, and then his queen, whose name I'm going to butcher, Clytemnestra? Maybe. Possibly. It could also be something entirely different. It seems to focus on these three women and this voyage home. I am very curious about it. Pat Barker has such a beautiful way with words. There's just something very poetic, but also accessible about the way she uses words. Like, I would not describe this as a literary fiction at all. It is more historical fiction, but there is just something poetic about her writing style in general. And then she does bring such a really compelling and rich sort of emotional life to her characters, especially these women who are going through surreal, tragic, and often just devastating circumstances of war. So I am looking forward, seems like the weird thing to say, having just described that, but I really enjoyed the other two books in this series, so I'm looking forward to picking this up very soon. Okay, so the next book, I don't entirely know how to describe it, and it's definitely the cover was shiny and I wanted it sort of book, but then curiosity got the best of me. It really sounds like nothing I have ever read before, and that also piqued my interest. So, Q, A Voyage Around the Queen by Craig Brown, and this is about the late Queen Elizabeth II. And I'm just gonna read part of the book flap so you can see what drew me in. So it says, Virginia Woolf compared her to a caterpillar. Anne Frank kept a picture of her on the wall of the secret annex. Jimi Hendrix played her a tune. Selassie gave her a gold tiara. Dirk Bogarde watched Death in Venice with her. Andy Warhol envied her fame. Donald Trump offended her. E.M. Forster confessed he would have married her if only she had been a boy. And this says it combines biography, essay, cultural history, dream diary, travelogue, and satire to create this book. And I mean, first of all, the cover, right? But then, look, do you see this? Do you see this? It's like a snakes and ladder. And there are things on here like cover of Time at age 3, shakes 1 millionth hand, shakes 3 millionth hand, Annus Horribilis, don't mention Diana, welcomes first men on the moon to Buckingham Palace. Like, it's just fascinating to me. And then from what I saw in the book, there are like images and photography, and I mean, it is a really big book, but it just, I'm intrigued by how this is gonna go. I feel like, sorry, let me put this cover back on. I honestly feel like this is either gonna be a book I'm gonna love or I'm gonna hate, but I'm ready for this wild ride. It just, like I said, doesn't seem like anything that I have ever read before. And I honestly haven't read anything on Queen Elizabeth II. I know a bit because I've watched some documentaries on the House of Windsor. I watched and rewatched The Crown multiple times, but obviously that is fictionalized. So very intrigued very, very curious. If anyone has read this, I would love to know your thoughts. And then the last book is the cookbook I mentioned up top. This is More is More by Molly Baz, which is her second cookbook. She was in, oh my god, every time I've tried to explain who Molly Baz is, I forget the name of the show. She is a pretty famous, pretty viral chef, and the whole concept of this cookbook is to do a little bit less of the exact measurement and just kind of make food until it tastes great philosophy, which is something I struggle with. I am a baker. That is my like thing, which is a science. So everything is exact. There's a reason that you do certain things. Whereas cooks, you just kind of, in my mind, it's just very intuitive and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna add salt. I'm gonna add this. I'm gonna add these herbs. This is that sort of book, and it has some gorgeous imagery throughout, like of food. Look at how delicious that is. I hope you can see that. But I'm very, that is a sizzled seedy tomato salad, just so you know. Very curious though to try this, because I'm always looking for things that are relatively easy to cook and flavorful. So, oh my god. Faux French onion soup. Do you see this? Do you see that cheese? Oh my god. But yeah, I am personally very excited to get to cooking with this. The other cookbook is called, just so you know, Cook This Book, and it's a similar design but a very vibrant blue color, if anyone is curious. Once I start sampling some of these recipes, I will let you know if they're any good, but my stomach is very excited about the prospect. So yeah, those were the books that I got for my birthday and a couple that I got for Christmas as well. I'm just very excited about all of these. And I hope that you've been able to add a few of them to your list as well. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that, and I will see you next week. But before I go, if you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure to leave a comment, and if you're not subscribed already, subscribe. It'll mean the world to me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!